Vacha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namaha Om Gyan Tirumandasya Gyanjana Salakaya Chakshua Militamira Tashmai Shri Guru Namaha Chinada Pisuni Chinataro Pisahistuna Amanina Manadina Kitni Sada Hari Tatenu Kampam Susamikshamano Vipakam Hitvak Vapupi Vididam Namaste Jivita Yomuktisa Dayabak Vachavegam Manashak Rodavegam Jivavegam Udaro Pashtavegam Etan Vegam Yo Visaheta Dira Savamapimam Pritivim Sasishyat Anyablasta Sunyam Gyan Kamirana Vritam Anukalenia Krishna Shilaram Bhakti Uttama Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadata Shivasdi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. So good morning and good afternoon, good evening to beloved devotees across the world, sisters and brothers, fathers, mothers, aunties, uncles, nephews, nieces, sons, daughters, everybody. And maybe we may even have someone who's not a devotee online. Everyone is beautifully welcome on the, that's you, Mike. Welcome to our non-devotee Maharaj, yes. Anyway, yeah, no, this is a beautiful week of the appearance day yesterday in the UK of Lord Ram. And we're very fortunate, actually this topic I've never heard before, so I'm very excited to hear this topic, because as you know, the subject matter is mercy, grace, Lila. So we're praying to all the avatars and all the acharyas for mercy for entry into Braj 2021. At the same time, we want to absorb ourselves in all the Leelas. And this particular Leela Raj is going to speak about is Lord Ram in Modrumadwipa. And I couldn't expand on this for even a second because I have no knowledge of it whatsoever. So I'm very excited to be learning something totally new from Maharaj, which wouldn't be for the first time. Maharaj is quite pressed for time today, so I'm going to hand over to him in a second. There may or may not be time for questions, but if you do have time, if you do have questions, I'd be very grateful if you Zoom chat the question to me directly, not to everyone, but to me directly, and try to keep the question as on topic as possible. And if Maharaj has time, he will, as usual, love to field those questions. Maharaj, a very warm welcome over to God's room there. You look great. The reception seems good. Welcome to Mercy, Grace, Lila. Haribol, Dandavat Pranam. Jai Nityananda.
Thank you, Yashoda. Jai Jai. I think everyone has to mute up. Yashoda Gopi, you have to mute your, yes, because it'll be a disturbance there. Everyone has to individually mute. So, yeah, that's it. You don't have to take your picture off though, but you can just mute. Otherwise your crackling will come through.
We love seeing people's pictures. We love seeing your faces.
Yes, Yashoda Gopi, he's talking about you. Dandavat Yasodhari, Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. Okay. So thank you very much for your, as always, very warm welcome, Yashoda, from the cold land of England. Although now it should be getting a little bit warmer with summertime, but it's always a pleasure to see you all. So I'll just enter straight into an offering, a presentation today for you all. I'm first of all offering millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Taratara Shishimat Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And I'm offering the same millions of times unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Taratara Shishimat Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shila Prabhupada, and all the Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord. My Dandavat pranams to all of you. on this day or evening, etc. So fascinating, speaking all around the world. Yes, yesterday here in India was a huge occasion. There's not a single child in a Hindu family that doesn't know and hasn't been brought up with the whole of the Ramayana Lila. The Ramayana is a part of their very culture. It's a part of the civilization here. It's interesting to appreciate that Lord Ram appeared 19 million years ago. Yashoda will do the mathematics. It was in the 24th Divya Yuga. Now we're in the 28th.
Maharaj, I'll do some calculations while you're talking. That's very exciting.
Okay. Yes. So it was calculated actually by one devotee, and because it's the 20
years ago, you're saying
24th Chatu Yuga. We're now in the 20. Yes, we're now in the 28th Chatu Yuga.
Do you know which yuga within the Chatu Yuga was?
This yuga, the same Manu Yuga.
Was it Satya Yuga or?
It was actually on the cusp between Treta Yuga and Dwarpa Yuga. This is exactly how Valmiki describes it.
As they say on Star Trek, I'm Dr. Spock. I'll check the star date for you, Marge. Let you know at the end.
So at the beginning, let me just say that we are approximately 19 million years after the departure of Ram. Yet every single time we begin to glorify him, it seems as if it was yesterday. It's because last year we glorified Lord Ram, and this indicates the eternality of these personalities that, like with Nrsingadev appeared in the Chakshush Manvantara, one entire Manvantara before, practically more than 1 billion years ago. Yet every time we celebrate him, it's as if it was just yesterday. So this is confirmation of the eternality of these personalities for us. I'm sure there's no one here who considers that Ram manifested so long ago, in the sense that we remember him constantly in his different pastimes, just as if it was like yesterday. I once stayed in a town called Kanpur near Lucknow in India, and every single day they have a recitation of the Ramayana going over loudspeakers, and they've been doing it for thousands of years, and they don't even know the date when they began this recitation. So it goes back so far, but the pastimes are so immensely beautiful and sweet and touching. Particularly, they touch on the mood of Sita's separation. This is quite prominent in the Lila, even though, just for our interest's sake, Ram actually ruled his kingdom, Ayodhya, for 11,000 years. But he was in separation from Sita for less than a year, about 11 and a half months, it's described. She was in Lanka. And it was the last 16 years of Ram's rulership that Sita had been banished to the ashram of Valmiki. So in all, we can say 17 years of separation are actually in the Ram Lila. Yet, they're very, very prominent in the various descriptions. This is what we remember when we hear about the difficulties of Sita Thakurani in Lanka, and her difficulties when she was taken to Valmiki's ashram at the very end of her life. Compared to Krishna, Krishna leaves Vrindavan for 100 years. He's away for 100 years. The gopis at Uddhav Kyari, they remain in that place for 100 years of separation. So what a difference the separation is in Krishna Lila to that in Ram Lila. And yet this point of the separation always seems to come up in the topics when we're discussing Ram Lila. Now, particularly today, if we go to the forest of Modrumadwipa, the island of Modrumadwipa here in Navadvip area, and the place of Mamagachi, we go every year for our parikrama to this place. And it's here that Srila Gurudev would discuss Ram Lila, because in Modrumadwipa, 19 million years ago, Lord Ram came here on his way to Dandakaranya. He'd already come through Chitrakoot, Panchavali. He'd already come through these other forests, and he was on his way to Dandakaranya with Sita Devi. And he came to this beautiful island of Modrumadwipa. And of course, appreciating the time lapse, Mahaprabhu wasn't going to appear for another 19 million years. And yet, we remember Ram in connection with Mahaprabhu at this very place. So one day, when Ram arrived in this very beautiful forest at the time, there was a huge, huge banyan tree, and many beautiful birds were making their nests in that tree and so on. It was a very beautiful atmosphere. And Lord Ram, he asks Lakshman to please make a cottage at this beautiful, beautiful place. And they live there for some time. It doesn't specify exactly how long, but during their stay there, one day, Lord Ram has a very interesting smile on his face. And Sita Devi, she inquires from Ram, "Oh, why are you smiling in such an interesting manner?" And he says, "I am remembering my pastimes in the future here, when I will manifest my Lila as Mahaprabhu or as Nimai Pandit in Navadvip. And you will be my wife. You will be Vishnu Priya. Vishnu Priya is Bur Shakti. So you will be my eternal Shakti at that time. You will be my wife in Navadvip. But I will leave you and I will take sannyas." And many times we remember this heartbreaking pastime of when Mahaprabhu leaves Vishnu Priya and dives into the cold Ganga and leaves his family home forever. And then the pastime where he goes to Puri, and then he comes back to Shantipur and he meets all the residents there. But then Sita Thakurani, she's questioning, she's looking at Ram, "Oh, why are you performing this pastime of sannyas? What is going to be the benefit of that? Why will you leave me and create such unhappiness for me at that time?" And then Ram begins to describe a little bit of the dynamics of meeting and separation. So this principle is carried through in all of Krishna's pastimes. In Vrindavan Lila, for example, it's practically 50-50 during the day when Radha and Krishna are together in an intimate situation, and then 50% of the day they're separated. So I remember Yasodhari, she was saying at the end of our Navadvip Parikrama talks that she had just begun to appreciate this exceptional dynamic of between meeting and separation, because it's mentioned so many times. It's so much of the ingredient for our journey to appreciate the speciality of Radha and Krishna's pastimes. So I wanted to speak something on this topic today. Not that I understand this topic, but I find it a fascinating topic because it's brought up and mentioned so many times, even in our chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, meeting. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, separation. Hare Rama, meeting. Rama Rama, Hare Hare, separation. So Srila Gurudev has explained that within this Mahamantra, again, it's exactly 50% divided between the meeting and the separation. So in Krishna Lila, we have 8 yamas of the day. We can begin from Nishanta Lila. In Nishanta Lila, there are no elders around. There's just Radha and Krishna in the most intimate pastime scene, in the most intimate embrace, actually in the whole 24 hours, takes place in Nishanta Lila. This is why it's so auspicious for us to meditate on Nishanta Lila during Nishanta Lila's time between 3:30 and 6 o'clock, 6:15 in the morning. If we meditate on this very, very intimate pastime, because in this pastime of Nishanta Lila, there is built into it meeting and separation, because when Radha and Krishna have to go back to their homes, then there is going to be separation after the meeting. So this Nishanta Lila, if we start from here, we start from this yama, that is like meeting. That's practically 2 hours and a little bit. And then the next Lila is called Prata Lila. That's when Krishna goes to the Goshala with his father and he helps milk the cows and he meets with some of the Sakas. And also he has a pastime meeting with the Sakis, but it's not in the intimacy of the other principal Leelas where he meets with Radha and Krishna. So with Radharani rather. So in the 8 yamas, there is Nishanta Lila, Madhyana Lila, and Ratri Lila. These 3 Leelas together constitute approximately 12 hours. And then the other yamas of the day also, of course, come to 12 hours. And in these other yamas of the day, there is no intimate meeting in the same way that there is in the Madhyana or Ratri. Radha and Krishna may meet briefly for a moment, but the elders are close by. So we appreciate the dynamic of the day. Trying to understand this, if Manjulali is there, she can throw up one little diagram just to you to contemplate. If you have that, Manjulali,
yes,
you can share it.
One second.
So we're going to run from Nishanta Lila, and then it's going to go to Prata Lila, then it's going to go to Purvana Lila, where in Purvana Lila, this is when Krishna takes the cowherd boys, the Sakas, into the field. So you'll need to expand this a little bit. All the blue petals of this lotus are intimate meeting periods where there are no elders around at all. And the maroon color or reddish color, they are all when Radha and Krishna are not together in the same intimacy. They may be together momentarily, but there's nothing like the intensity that they experience during the Ratri Lila or the Nishant Lila or the Madhyana Lila. These are very, very intimate pastime times. Whereas Prata Lila, as I just said, Krishna goes to the Goshala. Purvana, he's off to the forest with his Sakas. And then while he's with the Sakas, Krishna leaves them all and comes to Radha Kund and Kusum Sarovar. He meets with Radha and he's there for approximately 5 hours. And then he returns to the cowherd boys afterwards in the Apurvana Lila. And then they play sometime. And then there's the beautiful Goduli festival where he enters again into the village of Braj. This is called the Syayam Lila or the Syayam Yama of the day. This is called Astakalya. These are the 8 timefold segments of the day. So what it's demonstrating is the division between meeting and separation. So there's 12 hours meeting and there's 12 hours separation. And then Pradosh Lila, just before the Ratri Lila, is when Krishna is in the village of Braj and Mother Yashoda takes him for the communal entertainment. There are singers, there are dancers, there are dramas portrayed. Ram Lila is definitely portrayed in Krishna's time. They would dramatize so many of the pastimes of Ram. And coming back to Modrumadwipa, where I just began now, we can appreciate this dynamic very much by the question that that Sita Devi is asking Lord Ram, why are you taking sannyas as Mahaprabhu? Why do you do that? And he begins to explain that without the separation aspect, the meeting is not nourished. Basically, that's the beginning and end of it. And there's a beautiful poem by Rai Ramananda where he writes this. It's very interesting. Listen carefully. This is very beautiful. This is from the Padyavali compiled by Rupa Goswami. And he describes a shloka by Rai Ramananda. And he said, as long as there is hunger and thirst, eating and drinking make one feel very happy. As long as there's hunger and thirst. When the Lord is worshipped with pure love, transcendental bliss is awakened in the heart of the devotees. So if there is no hunger or thirst, the meal will be not so exciting for the eater. So this hunger and thirst is inspired by the separation moods, by the principle of separation. So we see throughout the Leelas of Krishna and of Ram, who we're talking about today, and of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in particular. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spends 24 years in Navadvip, exactly half his life in Navadvip. And then he spends 24 years in Puri. So again, the division is exactly 50-50. In Navadvip, it's principally a mood of sambhog, of meeting. Mahaprabhu is with all his eternal associates. He's with his mother and father for some time. And when he's performing the Ras Lila at Srivasangam, Gurudev has described that there is meeting in the heart. So basically, what I'm sharing today, I'm more or less exploring with you this dynamic. I've explained already, how can I be realized or understanding this? I'm not realized in this, but I'm trying to become more appreciative of the moods of meeting and separation. So this is what the topic is about today, this meeting and separation, which is described in Modrumadwipa in connection with Lord Ram, who we celebrated yesterday for the Ram Navami, for his appearance day. And it's the day that he's coronated also. So in this connection, Gurudev would speak in Mamagachi extensively on this topic of meeting and separation. And we understand further from the Rasa Tattva descriptions, especially in Jivadhamma. If we look in the 37th chapter of Jivadhamma, it's describing 4 types of separation, and there are 4 types of meeting which parallel the separation moods. So the first is Purvarag. We're all familiar with this in the pastime of Venugit. Venugit in chapter 21 of the 10th canto, it's described the gopis are feeling an anticipation in meeting. So this hunger, this thirst is being increased so that when there is meeting, it's going to be so much more accentuated. So it's helpful for us to appreciate what is the nature of this meeting and separation. So our acharyas have extensively opened this particular topic up. So 4 types of separation. There is purvarag. This is described in Venugit. The gopis, they're sitting in their homes, and in their internal vision, they're seeing Krishna in Govardhan, and they're having feelings of longing for Krishna. And in their higher state of consciousness, they're seeing that even the deer have more association, or they have a higher opportunity to associate with Krishna than they do. They're seeing the clouds as having more prem than they have. They're seeing the demigoddesses having more prem, the peacocks even, the cows. They're describing all these different personalities of Braj. And in their, it's called Arishya, in their jealous vision, they're seeing that they have more opportunity to render beautiful service to Krishna. So this is like a type of a madness, in fact. They don't have more opportunity to render service than the gopis have. The gopis are the highest, the very highest, the pinnacle of devotion to Krishna, known to mankind, we can say, across the board. There's no one who has higher feelings of attraction and devotion in existence than the gopis. The gopis are conclusively those personalities who we will be dedicatedly follow in order to acquire this one focused devotional service to Krishna. If we want to perform devotional service genuinely, if a feeling of attraction to Krishna has actually woken in our hearts, then we want to see who are those people who are capable of demonstrating that devotion the most. And in the Rai Ramananda Sambad, for example, it's very beautifully and very clearly delineated. It goes from, if you're interested, you can just take a note, you can write down verse 202 to verse 220. These verses, these 18 verses, only glorify the love of the gopis for Radha and Krishna. Their desire is to enhance their pastimes. So this is purvarag. And then the second type of separation is called man. We all understand the dynamics of man to some degree, even though it's actually not jealous and it's not anger, but we often describe it like that. Radharani is not jealous ever, and she doesn't get angry either. Maybe Lakshmi Devi gets angry or jealous, but Radharani doesn't. But it's a state, it's a condition of the heart when certain emotions have flared up that obstruct the meeting. It's when Radharani is feeling Krishna is not directing me his loving affection significantly, not enough. Therefore, to increase the rasa between Radha and Krishna, Radharani will go into this very exalted state of man. And we hear so many pastimes describing this. And this collectively is called a stage of separation. So this is also very interesting to contemplate. We're all practicing devotional service now. What does devotion mean? It means to find that focus of attraction principally to Krishna. How can my heart be more attracted to Krishna in service than anything else, than any other consideration? If we've managed to intensify the focus of our practice, our bhajan, you can say, or our chanting, to come to this point of wanting to develop hungrily this devotion, it's always performed by the sadhak in a mood of separation, just like Mahaprabhu was in Puri. For 24 years, he is our bhajan shiksha guru, and he's demonstrating a mood of separation that Radharani is experiencing from Krishna. Gurudev explains that practically there is no meeting in those final 24 years with Krishna, once or twice, but practically none. It's principally all Vipralamba Bhav. So Purvarag and Man, and then there is Prem Vaichitya. This is the third type of separation. And then following that type, then there is Pravash. This Pravash is the final separation. This is when the lovers are separated by a long distance. So these are the four types of separation. And then there are four types of union that parallel these separation moods. Perhaps you're all very familiar with this, but I'm just speaking this anyway for my own remembrance and purification, because personally, I want to understand this dynamic more and more. And I feel that by sharing it with you today, perhaps Krishna will give me, Gurudev will give me some deeper insight into this particular topic. So if you know all these facts already, just be patient and bear with me. It's always wonderful to hear them again. And we're thinking today also in relationship to Ram and Sita. They also experienced some of these separation moods to a certain degree, but very, very limited compared to the degree that the gopis experienced, because that we can say generally that romantic flavor or that rasa was nothing like as intense in Ram Lila as in Krishna Lila. In Krishna Lila, then it really comes to the forefront. And certainly Mahaprabhu, he brings this out in his Lila. So Mahaprabhu and Krishna Lila really bring this to the surface. So now paralleling these moods of separation, Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes that the meeting is called Sangshipta. This meeting is Sangshipta, and this is after Purvarag, and it's described as quite short and shy because they haven't actually consummated their meeting yet. So they're meeting, but it's still quite brief and hasty. So this particular meeting is described in Ras Katha as called Sangshipta. And then the meeting that parallels Man is called Sankiran. This Sankiran is like described as a contracted meeting, Radha mood of Man. And Krishna has had to purify whatever it was that Radharani perceived as an objection to actually come closer to Sri Radhika. This is all to inspire Krishna's greed. All of these moods of separation are equivalent to that verse I read of increasing the hunger and the thirst for the meeting. This is why there is separation, because it increases the hunger and the thirst for the meeting. So two sorts of meetings I've just described. Sangshipta is the first, and then Sankiran. And then Sangpana, S-A-N, is at the beginning of each of these meetings. Sang, like Sankirtan. Sankirtan means meeting, principally, this word, sang. So this third type of meeting, Sampana, is described as that which is enriched. So it's beyond the other two types of meetings, and it's an enriched meeting. This is how Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes it. And the fourth type is called Sangriddhiman. Sangriddhiman is the highest meeting, and this is described as when it is flourishing. So this, I think, to understand this topic, the only way we can appreciate this topic is to enter the consideration of Ras Vichar. We can't understand this by Tattva Vichar. We can explain the words, the vocabulary, etc. You can get a map of the movements, so to speak, but to actually get a an appreciation, we need to know the full spectrum of the Raskata that is described by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for example, in the last 14 chapters of Jaivadharma, which reflect directly all of the teachings of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu. They go chapter by chapter, exactly parallel, these chapters. So for the devotee who is aspiring to move forward on this path of appreciation of the intensity of affection between Radha and Krishna, then we must understand this topic of meeting and separation. Be very careful when you read those last 14 chapters and appreciate that this is never going to be about us, the conditioned jiva. We are trying to see Radha and Krishna. What is their mood of separation? Don't make the mistake of trying to put yourself in there and think, oh, am I feeling separation? Or am I feeling anubhav or sattvika bhav or etc. like that? It's not about us. Actually, to come into this realm of rasa vichar, the false ego, so to speak, should be purified sufficiently so we can just give our absolute attention to the loving pastimes between Radha and Krishna. Don't approach it as a yogi, thinking, oh, I can make some yogic advancement here. I can taste my anubhavs or my sattvika bhav. It's not about us. We'll become very confused. We won't understand anything, actually, if we approach it with that type of mentality. But if we've developed even a little bit of attraction for Krishna, and we know what makes Krishna the most happy is when he's with Radha. We see when he's with Mother Yashoda, he's hankering to go to the cowherd fields with the suckers. And when he's with the suckers, even though they love him, more than 1 million of their lifetimes worth, they love him. And Krishna will reciprocate with that, but still he leaves them. And he goes to Radhakund for 5 hours. He leaves all the suckers every single day. And he goes to Radhakund to be just with those gopis. So what is it? What is this speciality that the gopis have towards Krishna? This is the path that I want to follow. This is the path that my beloved Gurudev has put me on. This is the path that he's teaching us to follow. This anugatya, this rag anuga, we are following, and rupanuga in particular, we're following the speciality of Rupa Goswami or Rupa Manjari. All of our Guru Vagya, they're all Manjaris in this line. So this is just a little initial approach to contemplation on the topic of meeting and separation. How to appreciate, why do the acharyas speak so much about meeting and separation? Why is meeting and separation inbuilt into the process of the Maha Mantra that we chant? Why is it there constantly? It's to increase the greed for meeting. We always want Radha and Krishna to be meeting, but for the sadhak, his journey is one of separation. We are always in a mood of separation until our bhajan is totally consummated and our Vastu city is there and we've left this plane and we've entered back into Goloka Vrindavan. It's some future birth in the distant. Then, you know, that Staibar will wake up of my eternal service. But just trying to appreciate why the acharyas speak so much about meeting. Why is it built in to all of the Leelas, particularly with Ram Leela? Gurudev would describe many times that his whole village would go to the pandals. He was brought up a Ram Bhakta, we know. And he would go to the pandals in the village and they would watch for 3 or 4 hours Ram Leela. And Gurudev described the whole village would weep and cry at the poignancy of it, at the pathos of the drama of Ram Leela when Sita left and was kidnapped by Ravan. And even at the very end, when she gets banished from the kingdom and goes to Valmiki's ashram. And then even though it appears that all the villagers were so sad, they would all hungrily come back the next day for the second drama. And again, they would weep and cry. And again, they would come for the third day drama. And again, they would weep and cry. So what is it of this weeping and crying that is so attractive? What is this attraction in the separation that we are trying to appreciate? It's like one particular Geet, the Pranaya Geet, all the Geets, the 5 Geets, the Venu Geet, Pranaya Geet, Gopi Geet, Yugal Geet, and the Brahmara Geet. These are all about separation, all of them. All of them are accentuating our appreciation of the heart moods that the gopis feel in separation from Krishna. So in this Pranaya Geet, I've often spoken of this. This is so heartbreaking. The gopis, they've left everything. They've run to the forest. They've given up everything that a young girl would cherish and hold of value, their chastity, their shyness. They've given up attachments to their husbands, their families, everything they've given up. What's that? Nekala, Shrinkala. They've broken these shackles. Na pariyeham niravadya. Krishna, he praises them later on. And they've run to the forest, and then Krishna is apparently rejecting them, telling them to go back to their husbands. How do the gopis feel? They actually feel, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes, that they are not good enough for Krishna's love. That's how they feel. They feel that their love is not sufficient, because Krishna wants to churn their soft hearts to bring out a higher intensity of affection to them. That's why they feel like that. They are the most perfect personalities in existence, the gopis. Their hearts are absolutely as pure as we could imagine. And yet they are feeling this somewhat despondency when Krishna sends them back. They can't go back to their village. It's described they would feel they were eating their own vomit to do that. They've left their family behind. They scratch at Mother Earth, imploring her just to open up and embrace them. In other words, they want to suicide unless Krishna is going to accept them. So this intensity of greed, this is the greed that all of our acharyas indicate. Srila Gaura Govinda Maharaj in particular, he would talk about this topic regularly. He called the river of Prem was situated, had 2 embankments running beside the river of Prem. One is meeting and one is separation. So just to appreciate this dynamic, and all I'm trying to do today is just bring all of this out to our attention for our contemplation. I can't reach any conclusion because I'm not realized in this topic, but I just want to bring these topics to our attention to encourage our own practice. We know ourselves while we're chanting in the early morning hours. We're feeling somewhat satisfied, perhaps, somewhat peaceful. As soon as you pick up your mala first thing in the morning, there's a certain wonderful wave of connection that takes place after so many hours of ignorance sleeping. There's a wave of beauty and sweetness that impacts the heart then. And then as we start to churn this Mahamantra, we can contemplate these different situations in the day that Radha and Krishna experience. And as I said at the beginning, according to that map I showed you, there's 12 hours meeting and 12 hours separation. Even though I've actually explained this to some senior devotees, and they don't agree with me fully on this, because they say that there is meeting at different periods of the day, like the Prata Lila, Purvana Lila, Apurvana Lila, Syayam Lila, Pradosh Lila, that there is meeting between Radha and Krishna, but it's not an intense meeting. It is 100% not an intense meeting. The elders are always sitting in the background. The only intense meetings come in Ratri Lila. They come in Madhyana Lila. They come in Nishanta Lila. And that constitutes exactly 12 hours of Krishna's 24-hour day. So what are we thinking about while we're chanting? What is our contemplation? Oh, how can I have a peaceful mind? Will I have a good day today? I mean, a million trillion thoughts go through our minds when we're chanting, but we want to bring our minds and focus to these types of topics. And we can reflect these topics in Ram Lila. We can reflect these topics in Krishna Lila. And we can reflect these topics in Gaura Lila. So all of these avatars, we can taste something of this dynamic of meeting and separation. It's a fascinating topic. I find it fascinating because it always drives the consciousness forward. It's like a new horizon. It's like a new ground to contemplate more deeply. It's not something that we've gone over so much, perhaps. It's always ever fresh. It's as if it's on the edge of time, so to speak, because it's carrying us into a timeless place, because transcendence is beyond time and space, real transcendental consciousness, and we can access it by the gift of Mahaprabhu. Don't doubt for a single second that this Maha Mantra can carry us right to this place. It will, it can. It has the power to. 100%, it has the power to carry us into an appreciation. Don't try to understand these topics. Don't use the material intellect to try and work in there. It's beyond the intellect. It's beyond the senses. Bhakti-Vinod Thakur again describes in Jaiva Dhamma. It's beyond the workings of the mind. We're talking about the spiritual world, the spiritual land, and that land is in a state of consciousness. So it's that state of consciousness that we are refining daily with our general practices of how to embrace with absolute affection. If we are feeling so attracted to Krishna and his happiness, we want Radha and Krishna to be together. And there's a beautiful verse that Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj, he sings in his Radhika Astikam in the songbook. I just read it for you. This is talking about Sri Radhika. Upon being separated from Sri Krishna for even half a moment, she becomes distressed by the ever rising feelings of lowliness. That's Lowlines, lowliness. Just like I described the gopis when they meet Krishna in that Pranaya Gita, they don't feel their love is worthy enough. So this feeling of lowliness is how Radhika feels when she's separated from Krishna. And then it's described, and great restlessness. This restlessness is very much described in so many pastimes. When these higher states of anubhavs, sattvika bhavs, arise in response to these feelings, and they can arise, Prabhus, in meeting as well as separation. This is conclusively why meeting and separation have ultimately the same amount of bliss. How many times has Gurudev said, meeting is the pinnacle and separation is the highest? So what are you left with? They both can produce the same extent of bliss in the divine personalities of Radha and Krishna. In principle, when we discuss these sattvika bhavs, because it's when the sattvika bhavs we understand are what? They are the very elements of our body get touched by these emotional charges of attraction. Earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the elements of our body. And when these elements get touched by these higher states of emotions in Radha and Krishna, they exhibit extraordinary symptoms, as Mahaprabhu exhibited in Puri, when he went into the ocean and all his limbs elongated, when he became like a tortoise. This was an expression of these Ashtasattvika bhavs. So these are the bhavs of the divine personalities, not of us. Don't be thinking, as I said before, like a yogi, oh, can I, experience, is this? No, I am always the servant trying to arrange for Radha and Krishna to experience these higher states of Mohan, Akya Mahabhav, which is in separation, and Madan Akya Mahabhav, which is in meeting. We always want to bring Radha and Krishna together, but for the sadhak, we are rolling around in these feelings of separation from Guru, separation from Krishna, separation from the Dham, separation from our acharyas, separation from Vaishnavas sometimes. So this is the feelings that the devotees can relish, in fact. How to appreciate, where does it fit into our forward progressive journey? So I think I've probably said more than I should have said, but I feel like I've just touched on the peripheral of some topics for your contemplation. And I was principally beginning in appreciation of Ram in Modrumadwipa, and how he's describing to Sita that taking sannyas is going to actually nourish the meeting ultimately. That's the principle. That beautiful poem by Rai Ramananda, that without hunger and thirst, how can eating be a pleasure? So the hunger and thirst represents the separation. So these are the contemplations which our acharyas offer us for consideration while we're chanting and while we're offering our prayers. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And if Yashoda Ji has some questions.
Yeah, that was super beautiful, Maharaj. Thank you so much. I do actually, I haven't got any questions from the devotees, although everybody, if you have a question, please direct it towards me now. I had a couple of things. I had a question I want to ask you, and also I wanted to make an observation, if I may. The question, just a quick announcement. Someone asked, where's this being broadcast? Because they couldn't see it being broadcast. It's going to be on the YouTube channel. It's going to be up there on the Bhakti Zoom Saver Team YouTube channel. So that's where it's going to be broadcast. If you want to share it with other people later, that would be fantastic. Is there some, in terms of relationship, Maharaj, there always seem to be, sometimes in Krishna consciousness, you kind of get a sense that there's some secret to be explored, or some rust to be understood that's not necessarily evident, but you have a smell for it, so you need to ask the question. So this is where this is coming from. This is the first time I've heard this Lila. I never knew that Lord Ram went to Modrumadwipa. It's all very beautiful.
One extra part of that Lila, Yashoda, just before you say any more, is that with an arrow, Sita, she wants to know what Krishna looks like when he comes. She doesn't know yet.
Wow. So
with an arrow, he carves a beautiful figure of Gopinath. He carves Gopinath with his arrowhead, and that Gopinath is in Ramuna. This is Kirchor Gopinath in Ramuna. When we go to Ramuna on the way to Puri, we see that same Kirchor Gopinath worshipped today. So Ram, he carves for Sita a picture to inspire her heart of how beautiful Gopinath looks. Sorry to interrupt your question.
No,
just
that wasn't an interruption. That was an elevation. That was beautiful. My question is there some relishable significance, therefore, that Gurudev appeared on the planet as a Ram Bhakta in all of this?
Well, I can think of many things in that regard, that the very heart of Bharatvarsh or India, as I said at the beginning, is principally based, civilization is based on Ram Lila, Maryad Purushottam, the rules of etiquette, social behavior. So if that's not strong, if that's not fully appreciated in the social world, in the external world, how can you expect to flourish in the internal appreciation if you haven't got the groundwork on the outside? So that's my thought instantly, that Gurudev was so much grounded in Ram Lila, so much. I mean, he was brought up, his parents were Ram Bhaktas. When his father left this world, he went back and he recited the whole Bhagavatam to him. And when he had finished, his father left this world at that very moment that Gurudev had finished. So in other words, he kind of replaced Krishna with Ram, which is what happened to Gurudev himself. There's no difference. But within Ram Lila in particular, in answer coming to your question, it is the foundation of Indian culture, of how to behave, how to have one wife, how to honor, respect society, how to perform your occupational duty, etc. All of this was so much, and loyalty, trustworthy, chivalry, all of these high, beautiful qualities, nobility, noble qualities that inspire, like at the beginning of the Bhagavatam. This Ram Lila is described in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, and it inspires the heart in relationship to the external world, which gives us a solid platform. If the platform's not solid in the external world, we become sahajiyas.
Yeah.
We'll be dressing up as gopis.
It reminds me of what you first told me when I was really, I mean, I was introduced to Rasa Tattva right at the beginning because Gurudev always made the goal very clear. But on a granular level, you really introduced it to me years ago. And you made, one of the things you said to me that was very clear was the horse, the horse is the tattva and the rider is the ras. And you have to have that. You've got to make sure the tattva is solid upon which the ras sits. That's always really lodged in my mind as a very, very important. It's like, you know, when you go out and play cricket, you put your leg pads on. You don't just take the ball, you know.
Right. Yes. But when you build a building, you go, you know, many yards under the ground. If you want to build a tall palace of Ras, 100%. You have to go deep under the ground for your foundation and footing. So that's why I think Ram Lila was Gurudev's foundation from birth.
So you may chastise me for being speculative here, and I'm fully willing to take the chastisement. But is there any possibility that in Gurudev coming as a Ram Bhakta, that Yoga Maya may have been making an arrangement for his separation, for his ultimately coming to come to Krishna? Is there some separation and meeting Lila Ras within Gurudev's own appearance?
Don't quite follow you, Shoda. Sorry.
Well, he was born as a Ram Bhakta, right? He was totally, yeah. So at a certain age, he must, I don't know exactly what the chronology was, but at a certain age, he must have come over to externally. It must have seemed that he came over to the whole Radha Krishna Lila.
Actually, the pastime explicitly is that the only book he came to the Gaudiya Math here in Navadvip with was Ramcharitmanas. He brought this book with him. This was like his heart and soul from birth. Ram Lila and all of his affection and attraction was Shroti Maharaj was telling us yesterday that Gurudev told him directly, very privately one time, that he had direct darshan of Ram, Sita, Lakshman, and Hanuman. Gurudev had direct darshan of these personalities. That's how melted Gurudev's heart was towards this Lila. But it doesn't contradict putting Radha and Krishna on top of that. It actually gives the foundation. That's what we're sort of talking about here. Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying more foundation than separation. There's no separation there.
No. It's just a transition. It's a transition of focus of heart from Sita and Ram to Radha and Krishna. But such a transition. I mean, it's enormous, isn't it? Between Ram and Sita. It's enormous. It's fascinating.
It actually gives the fact this kind of emphasis of Gurudev's sort of external journey, if you like, is making me more hungry to understand and to enter into more Ram Tattva, because it's not an area that I'm particularly acquainted with.
No, it's like it's a defect for the most Westerners, that we haven't been brought up with this. Because when I share with the Indian devotees, and we have a few classes already, it's just amazing to hear them, Prabhu, because they've been brought up with it. And when they come out with pastimes, it's like it comes from such a deep place. It's like we were brought up with Jesus, and Bethlehem and Jerusalem and things like that, perhaps from birth. But replace that with the excellence of Ram Lila and so extensive pastimes. They have almost every single day newer and newer pastimes to share about Ram Lila. If you've got a bunch of Indians together, that they can go on for days and days and days, not repeating themselves, in their descriptions. It's so detailed. There's a pastime when Ram was entering a boat, and the boatman had heard that by the dust of Ram's feet, he would turn a stone into a woman. And he didn't want his boat to be turned into a woman. He needed his boat for a livelihood. And there's such a beautiful pastime just about that, situation. And Ram, Yashodhari knows this pastime. Yeah. I mean, anyone brought up in this culture, you just know all of these past, and they just go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Maharaj, there's an observation I want to make, but it's not mature or developed enough for to be shared in public. So I'd like to maybe just have 5 minutes of your time
under the table.
Before I don't want to put some. No, I think it's quite an exciting observation, but I just want to make sure it's bona fide before I,
bring it out. Okay.
Vegam,
Okay.
I did. Any?
Does Yashodhari have anything to say? She's there.
I was just going to say, Maharaj, that you're right. Most Indians have grown up with Ramayana or growing up with Ram, Sita, Lakshman, and Hanuman. And actually, it's really. I was just watching the Ramayana that was Ram Sagar's Ramayana from when we were a kid, the really old school. It's like the most beautiful program ever. It's like the old Mahabharata. And I was watching yesterday, I think it was, of Ram's birth Lila, and looking at the three mothers and stuff, and it was just so beautiful. And I didn't realize how much I've learned from Srila Gurudev from that, and being able to observe it from a different angle now. And I was listening to a lecture, and I can't remember who it was, but they were describing that how Srila Gurudev's speciality was that how he brought a different aspect of Ram's moods to the Ramayana, and no one else has ever described it the way that Srila Gurudev has. Prime example of Mother Keke, and how everyone is normal. If you speak to any Indian about Mother Keke, they're like so against her. But Gurudev brought a different angle to that, and
totally.
So yeah, it's just, and Gurudev used to say as well, be careful about like reading the Ramayana, because if you get too into Ram Lila, Ram will take you away. You will only stay in Ayodhya, and you won't be able to go any further. So just be very careful. And
put too much sweetness in Krishna Lila.
Yeah, well, I think you can see that in Sukdev Goswami's Srimad Bhagavatam. Sukdev Goswami doesn't describe it for long. He doesn't describe Ram Lila for long. It's a very short period, and then he carries over.
Yes. Very good observation.
So if someone starts reading Ramayana, just pray it and hold him to Gurudev's lotus feet before you do that, because you'll get absorbed.
Is that on YouTube?
What?
The Ramayana that you're watching?
Yeah. I'll send you the link.
Is it like 125 episodes or something?
Yes, that's the one. That's
English? Does it have English subtitles?
Yeah.
Oh, send it to me, please.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
It's amazing.
I might get my mum to watch it too. You never know.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got the old effects of the the string in the world. You can. It's got
Oh,
no.
it's kind of like the Indian version of the clangers, then.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah,
you love
got
it.
That's
But
beautiful.
there's a modern version of it that's really, you know, super duper nicely put together. There's a recent one.
Yeah, there's
Version.
two versions. It's like the
Yeah.
Mahabharata.
Okay, don't confuse me, guys. We'll like, you know, you're talking to a Ram neophyte. Which one would you recommend?
To be fair, like anyone that's watched the old Ramayana and Mahabharata, and then you watch the newer version, you're kind of like, you can't compare. It's like, no, this is
Well,
wrong.
the old one's better. The old one's better.
Yeah, the old one. Well, I personally think the old one's better.
I'm going with the old one. I'm going with the old one. Don't confuse me.
Don't
let me think anymore. I just want to.
The old one also has taken much of the scripture, much of its background from Tulsidas and Valmiki's Ramayana, actually. So there's a lot more Siddhanta in them ones than they are the new ones. So
well,
they're more accurate.
you've sold it to me now, totally. Yeah.
Yes, good.
Maharaj,
Okay.
just to finish off, I've posted this to everyone. Ram appeared 18,149,000 years ago.
Okay, we can round it out to 19 million.
No, you round it down to 18. It's wrong. Just let you know. I checked it 3 times.
Tell me what your calculation was again.
18,149,000.
I'll tell you why it's 19 million. Valmiki himself says it's 19 million because there's a consideration here. It's on a Sunday. You know, it's those Sunday, Sandhi. It's on the gap, on the cusp between Treta Yuga and Dwarpa Yuga. It's very hard to understand. I was having this discussion just before this call, and this person was telling me from Valmiki, you know, he reads the Hindi and the Sanskrit and everything. He was saying Valmiki has said himself it was 19 million. The calculation is what he did. And that Dasarath rules for 60,000 years and Ram rules for 11,000 years. So 60,000 years would put him more in the Satya Yuga era, because in Satya Yuga, they live for 100,000 years. Whereas in Treta Yuga they live for 10,000 years. So 11,000 years we could stretch to Ram's rulership in Treta Yuga, but his father, 60,000 years, how do you reconcile that up? That was what I was trying to get the reconciliation on. That's how I realized that it was on the cusp of these two ages. So Dasarath is a carryover from the previous age lifespan, and Ram is coming into the newer one. So there is a Sandhi in there. There is a gap. Just a Sandhi is like in February, we have an extra day sometimes.
Yeah, Sandhi wouldn't be longer than the age itself, would it?
No.
I
don't understand it. I don't understand it.
We'll take it offline. I'll report back later. Otherwise, you should have to fall asleep.
Okay. Thank you all so much for inviting me to discuss this topic. And
I think the devotees loved it. Looking at the comments, really appreciated it.
Hope so.
Yeah.
I hope it ignites our inquiry into, because I teed off Yashodhari here because she was saying at the end of the Navadvip Parikrama, she was starting to appreciate this dynamic of meeting and separation. So it is such a huge topic, and there's a lot of information that we can use our intellect on initially. And then from there, with our chanting, we can go more emotionally into the feelings, etc., which is where the real heart and juice is. But it's something that we need to apply ourselves to appreciate, because it's the journey, meeting and separation. It's everywhere. All right, Prabhus.
Raj, can I get you on? Do you want to stay on, or why don't you stay on rather than me calling you on WhatsApp? It's a good connection.
But then everyone else has to jump off.